Hey, my name's Jonathan, and I'm a veteran.
Hi, my name is Daryl, and I'm a veteran.
My name is Chad, and I'm a veteran.
Hey, I'm Travis. I'm an Air Force veteran.
Hi, my name's Ashley, and I'm a veteran.
Hey everybody, Carolee here. Hopefully everybody's doing great on this Sunday evening. And hopefully you all have remembered to change your clocks forward. Always a fun time. But on the flip side, it's still daylight outside, so that's nice. But trying to get to bed early will be an interesting feat. Let's see, who do we have out here in the comments? Jason, thank you. And I appreciate you coming out. Anybody who is going to be joining me, make sure if you haven't already, or if you're watching this after the fact, the recording, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this content. This is for our veterans. We want to get the word out far and wide and let them know that there is a place for them to come out, tell their stories, and any resources that they might know of in their particular state. So definitely pass that word on. So tonight I have a wonderful guest for you. His name is JT Cooper, and he is an Army veteran. So let's go ahead and bring him on.
Hello.
JT, hi.
How
Welcome. Excellent. Thanks so much for joining tonight. I know you're a very busy person.
Am I centered up?
Yeah, fairly centered. Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. Sorry.
That's all right. So how have you been? What have you been up to? Anything fun?
Haven't had a lot of fun in the last year, but I'm getting there. I had a back surgery a year ago, December, and I've had some major complications. So I've
Oh, goodness.
I've been in and out of the hospital. I've had knee surgery because I was falling so much, and my at least I'm walking. I shattered my L4, and the bone shards had sliced my spine in 7 places. And for the first 2 weeks, I was paralyzed, and they told me they didn't know for sure if I'd walk again. So just to be up and moving is one thing, but I'm
Yeah.
dealing with a lot of nerve pain and that kind of stuff. But I'm trying to.
Oh, well, I'm sending you some healing thoughts, and hopefully you can recover quickly, because that's no fun. But it's great that you're able to be up and moving, especially where you couldn't walk for such a time.
Yeah, I've spent probably close to 10 months last year on a walker, and I'm on a cane now, and trying to
Mm.
keep falling and having more problems, and just trying to rehab. Been in I've been in physical rehab in the hospital more in the last 18 or 14 months than I have in my whole life. So
Oh, goodness. Well, Jason says, thank you so much for your service and also Godspeed on your recovery. Um,
I appreciate that.
so, why don't we go ahead and start by having you tell us a little bit about your childhood and education?
Well, I'm from Jamestown, Tennessee, which is a little small country town. Raised on a farm. We did broiler chickens for Tyson. Uh, I went to Alvin C. York High School. And for those of you that don't know, Alvin C. York was the most decorated soldier of World War One. And I graduated. When he came back home. The legislature of Tennessee offered it. Said you can have anything in the state of Tennessee you want. He said, I just want a school built so that the hill kids from where I come from could get an education, and it not be controlled by the local politicians that always try to take the money and not have school resources for the kids. So we're the only state funded high school in the state of Tennessee, and it's written into the charter uh, that forever and a day, Tennessee will pay for Alvin C. York Institute. And besides the Tennessee School for the Blind, we're the only state-funded school in Tennessee. So we get pretty good support from the state.
That's excellent.
I was in ROTC, so every year we did a honor guard. I was part of the rifle company, so we did honor guard at his gravesite, and we helped bury his wife, Miss Gracie, when she finally passed. And it's just it's been a benefit to me to know his whole story, because when he came home, it wasn't about what he did or what he could get out of it. It was about how he could continue to serve. And those local politicians got mad because the state money didn't go through them, that they decided they weren't going to bus any kids to that school.
Really?
So Alvin C. started raising money and bought buses to bus kids to the school in his honor. And he drove one of those buses until he got too old to drive.
Wow.
So having that example of somebody coming home and looking for another way to serve. And one of the things I tell people when I do my little outings and stuff is that, you got to find something. When you go to war, you join the military and you go off to war, you realize there's something bigger than you. And so you got to find something bigger than you, even though you're not wearing a uniform and people's not telling you what to do anymore. You got to find something to do that's bigger than you to focus on. And, they taught us a lot of stuff in the military. And I hear people say all the time that they didn't teach us to come home, but all we're doing is putting new tires on an old car or an old truck. And
that's a good way to think of that.
We got to find a way to put new tires on and figure out how to use the lessons we learned. I mean, they made us leaders. They made us, they taught us how to lead. They taught us how to stand up. They taught us how to be, quote unquote, heroic. So when we come home and we see these, you're never going to be able to share with your family or share with a civilian that feeling. You can only share that with other vets. But you know what it feels like. So if you're not getting that, you're never going to get that by just making, $20 an hour as parts roll down the assembly line. You're going to have to find something outside of that, whether it's coaching baseball, coaching football, doing pee-wee stuff, or actually, going to work at a school. You've got to find something to pour yourself into that's bigger than you, or you're never going to be satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing nowadays is I think that the military has realized from their past, they've learned that helping to provide resources, of course, for those who are going to be released from duty back into civilian life, they're starting to provide classes and resources, which is handy. I mean, that's huge, and helping them determine what they want to do when they get out. So that makes a difference, I think.
Well, I think you're going to, for me, I needed a couple of years away from the military before I really was not mad at the military anymore. And I started looking at the positives instead of looking at the negatives and some of the reasons that I got out. And then one of the things I dealt with really bad, and the one time that I spent a month in a 1-bedroom apartment in Syracuse, New York. Well, I had a 6-month lease, but there was 1 month in particular when survivor guilt was on me so bad that I actually put the barrel in my mouth. And that was in 1996, so I'm a long way away from that. But at that moment, if I couldn't figure out something to live for, and why I might have lived and Jimmy died or Cornell died, these guys had families to come home to. They had kids, they had wives. I had none of that. And they brought us home on December the 19th from Somalia, and they sent us home on the 23rd so we could be home for Christmas. And I scared my family so bad at Christmas because I didn't know how to act.
Ah,
I didn't get a transition from, going to the Porta John with a weapon, or everywhere I went, I had 4 or 5 of my buddies getting my back, to being in the airport all by myself.
right.
And then I get to my family, and we're having Christmas, and it wasn't some of my other cousins mainly, but they didn't understand. And one of the questions I got asked the most, well, did you have to kill somebody? That's between me and some. That's nothing that you need to ask me.
Exactly.
That's I've not dealt with that yet. So why am I going to talk to you about it when you can't comprehend any of it? What if I sat here till I was blue in the face, you wouldn't understand.
Exactly
So,
right.
so that's a very private thing that I wasn't ready to talk about. And honestly, they had give us a month off. They give us a month of leave, and I made it at home about, I don't know, within a week. I was on a plane back to Fort Drum, New York. And when I got back to the barracks, even though I had a month off, when I got back to the barracks, there was a third of the people that I had been with that had went home that was already back too. So none of us had time to process. And I think that's one of the reasons now that when people come back, they hold them for a couple of weeks before they let them go home. I didn't process. I went straight home for Christmas. And, I don't know if this is more what you want or not, but, I had a bunch of cousins. And my dad had 11 brothers and sisters. And we always did Christmas morning at my grandmother's house. Well, when I was in the Army, Jimmy Joe and I were roommates. And there was a constant fight over who owned the Swiss Army knife that we were passed back and forth. We'd always joke that the owner was not, possession was 9/10 of the law. Neither one of us wanted to fess up to who originally had the Swiss Army knife, but we traded it back and forth all the time, working on weapons and this, that, and the other. So it was a constant little argument we had as roommates as to who originally owned the Swiss Army knife. Well, at my grandmother's on Christmas morning, everybody cooks breakfast while they wait on everybody to show up. So the thing is, everybody cooks breakfast, and then once they get breakfast cleaned up and the dishes washed, we open presents. Well, when everybody's in the kitchen cooking breakfast, they're slamming doors and screaming over one another and talking out loud. And I was just sitting over in the corner on a couch in my grandma's living room, just trying to keep my stuff together. And I had the Swiss Army knife in my pocket, and I was using it like a worry stone. I had been for days. And all of a sudden, one of my little blonde-headed cousins, who I think at the time she was about 6, she came walking up while I was sitting in the corner, and she said, "We want you to have the first present, Jay. We want you to have the first present." And I was like, "No, we don't open presents until after breakfast." And I looked over her shoulder, and her mom was standing there, and she said, "Just take it." And I was like, "Okay." And when I opened the present, it was a Swiss Army knife, just like the one I had in my pocket.
Wow.
And I lost my shit. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
You say whatever you want. This is for you. This is your platform.
I'm a little colorful sometimes in my vocabulary.
That's okay. That is quite
And
okay.
I went to one of the back bedrooms and shut the door. And for the first time in a while, I cried. And I wasn't going to come out of the bedroom, and my dad started knocking on the door. He's like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I was like, "Just leave me alone. Just walk away. Leave me alone. Let me do my thing." I said, "I'm not." He said, "You need to come out here. You've got everybody concerned." I was like, "I'm not coming out in front of everybody. So when everybody leaves, you can take me home."
Mm.
We got to understand, my dad was one of these guys that tried to please everybody except his own family. And for the first time that I remembered in my life, my dad stood up for me. And he goes in there and tells everybody that hadn't had breakfast yet, they hadn't opened the presents yet. He put them outside in the cold on the back porch and in the backyard and got them out of the house and walked me out the front and put me in the car. And we started back up the mountain.
Wow.
And we got about halfway up the mountain. My dad pulled the car over and he started to cry a little bit. He said, "There's no way I can imagine what you've been through." And he said that if I could go back and do a lot of things, I'd do them different. But I can't. So by God, I can't do nothing about it. He said, "But there is one thing." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I'd like us to be friends." And I said, "I think we can work that out." And that was the first time my dad ever told me he was proud of me. So there's that. But I ruined Christmas morning for a lot of people because they didn't understand. I couldn't explain it to them. If I couldn't put it in words for myself, how in the hell am I going to explain it to anybody else?
Right.
And I just need some time. So, I'd always been into poetry and that kind of stuff. I joined the Army because I read every Louis L'Amour book that he ever wrote.
And he
I
had a
wanted
lot.
to be that hero that rode off into the sunset kind of thing. And when Jimmy, I'm gonna back up just a little bit.
That's okay.
Because I was an ROTC, I joined the Army as a PFC. So I was an E3. So when I got to basic training, they put me as platoon guide when we first got there because I had some quote unquote military knowledge. So I spent most of my time teaching people how to shine their boots, how to do their uniform, what the ranks was. I was quizzing people and doing, so that our platoon could be the best platoon when it come to taking these quizzes and tests and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So my third week of basic training, I get a phone call, which we weren't supposed to have phone calls yet. And they sent for me, and I go down to see the first sergeant because that's who they said, you need to go see the first sergeant. I go see the first sergeant. He said, "Cooper, you got a phone call." So I knew something wasn't right. So I go out, and there's this, back there was a whole bay of cell phone or of public phones, money phones, and there was one that had the receiver laid on top of it. And I go over, and it was my Aunt Barbara, and she said, "We're going to need you to come home." And I'm like, "What do you mean I need to come home?" And they're like, "Well, your brother has drowned. Your mom and dad have went to claim the body.
Oh,
Come home for the funeral."
I'm very sorry. That
Oh, no,
had
no.
to have been really difficult at that time.
Well, we hadn't been paid yet, so I didn't have an LES. So the first sergeant spent like 3 hours trying to figure out how to get me to the Red Cross for an emergency loan for a plane ticket when we hadn't got paid yet, and he couldn't prove that I was actually going to be paid.
Goodness.
So while I'm sitting outside his door waiting to be taken to the Red Cross, here comes 4 or 5 of the guys from my platoon. And we were actually in a cohort unit where we were all going to train together and then go to our duty station together. And this was one of the tests the military ran on trying to build rapport and camaraderie. Well, 4 or 5 of these guys come downstairs and they knocked on First Sergeant's door and they said, "First Sergeant, permission to talk to PFC Cooper." And he's like, "What do you need?" And he was like, "Well, sir, we took up a collection and we want to help him get home." So they handed me a wad of money that bought my plane ticket and said whatever was left to buy some flowers for my mom. But the one thing they wanted was for me to come back because they didn't want to finish that without me.
Which is understandable. I mean, you helped motivate them and help them, to that point too. So,
well, back then, and I don't know how exactly it is today, but back then you didn't get personal items during basic training.
Yeah, they don't have them here now anyway that I know of either.
So,
well, at least not in the Marine Corps, they don't.
When I got back, my platoon sergeant for my basic training company let me keep a picture of my brother. So I get up every day. I go do what I had to do. I wasn't as motivated as you can probably imagine, but there wasn't one task that I didn't perform. But at night, after lights out, I would take his picture and go in the shower stall. In the shower, we had gang showers, so I'd go in the shower room and I'd sit in there and grieve. Well, about the 3rd night that I did that, this guy named Jimmy Joe came into the shower and he just sat down on the other side of the room. Never said a word. The next night when I go in there, here comes Jimmy Joe again, sitting down on the other side of the shower. I said, "Man, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm not going to let you cry by yourself." He said, "I had a brother that died too, and I'm just going to sit over here until you're ready to talk."
Wow.
So Jimmy and I went to Fort Drum together. We ended up in the same platoon, in the same company, and we asked if we could be roommates. So we become the twins because he was fair-haired and about the same height as me, that kind of thing.
Right.
And we fought over the damn knife all the time. So 18 months later, I'm in Mogadishu, Somalia. A couple of Black Hawk helicopters got shot down. We're on QRF. So we go out. I was in the 2nd vehicle to leave the compound, and Jimmy was on the 4th. And Jimmy ended up catching a bullet right under the lip of his Kevlar. And I lost 2 brothers in 18 months. And I've been raised in church and this and that. And I knew a lot, been baptized, but I become really angry with God.
And so how did you deal with that?
Well, I acted out a lot for a while. When I finally got back, we went to Panama, Somalia, and Haiti. And I felt like I'd been the world's policeman long enough. So at the end of the day, I got out. And I guess that month that I sat in that apartment in Syracuse, New York by myself, I spent 42 days, and that's back when you had answering machines and not cell phones.
Right.
I spent 42 days. I counted them. I spent 42 days without somebody from home calling me because they were still scared of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that month that I had a bottle of Jack Daniels on my right side, and I'm right-handed. I had a notepad for writing poetry and journaling, and then I had the pistol laying on the left. And every day it was a choice as to which one I picked up. And I spent a month really angry with God. And you know, the military teaches you that, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil because I'm the baddest MFer in the valley. You know, I still had just enough bravado in me that I thought if I killed myself, I'd go up there and kick God's ass. And that's the truth. That's how I felt at that moment. And I told him, I said, if you don't give me a reason to live that's bigger than me, I'm going to come meet you and we'll talk about it. There's a whole long story about all that, but
Well, I'm not far from you.
I finally talked with God, and I felt like he talked back. And so I gave it another shot. And to this day, I don't know if I was too weak to pull the trigger or too strong. And that's a question I still struggle with. Was I too weak to commit suicide, or was I too strong? And I know in my mind that I was too strong. But in my heart, I still question that sometimes. But suicide hasn't been on the table since 1996.
Which is really very
For
good.
me. For me.
Right.
And when I go out and talk to other veterans, and I have some of my shows, which we'll get into in a little bit, I always talk to vets and tell them, you know, the only person that's going to tell you to live is you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the VA does as much as they can. But when a vet comes home and he gets 100% disability and he doesn't have to go try to find a job right off the bat, he don't have to try to return to society right off the bat, and he's got enough time to sit around and watch paint dry, that's bad.
Right.
Because in the military, they taught us how to make battle buddies.
Right.
And like I said before, civilians are never going to fully understand it. But they taught us how to make battle buddies. So you got to make life buddies. You got to have people that want to live life as much as you want to live life, and not just sit around in these AA meetings or these PTSD meetings. They're great. I ain't got nothing against them.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to find people outside of there to do life with.
Right. You've got to find, as one of my guests said, you've got to find your tribe.
Well, yes, I'll say that's good. But at the end of the day, you're not going to help yourself if you're wallowing in the same self-pity everybody else in the room's got.
Right. Yes.
And that self-pity is a strong word, because I know that a lot of us have seen and actually been through real stuff. But in so many places I've been, there's always a handful of guys in there that are exhibiting drug-seeking behavior. They're embellishing, and they don't even have the sense enough to know that they're embellishing, and everybody else in the room knows they're full of shit. You know, this is one specific that I use that aggravates me to death, and it has aggravated me ever since I was in that room. It was the Navy guy that had PTSD, and I finally I couldn't handle it anymore, and I said, well, when did your PTSD start? Because PTSD can usually lead back to a specific event or a series of events that caused you to have these reactions? I said, so what was the event that began your PTSD journey? Key one was it took him a minute to think about it. But key two, he came back and he said, I was on a ship in the Med. We fired rockets into Fallujah, and I know that we killed people. Well, he was never face to face with it. He never saw one of his buddies get his head. He never learned the real reason why they call a K-pot a brain bucket. He never walked into a stadium during triage and saw 17 body bags lined up at the end of the field and know that there's nobody can help them bastards. And at least 3 of them are your friends.
That's difficult to say the least.
What's that?
That's difficult to say the least. Hard to
There
fathom unless you're there.
There was this one guy that was laying on a stretcher, and we were walking down, and they were putting like the critical people on one side, and as they were triaging them, they were moving them from one side to the other one as who goes next in the chopper. And the ones with the less severe injuries were on one side, and the critical were on the other side. Well, there was a lot of RPGs out there from the enemy.
Right.
So there was a lot of shrapnel wounds, which I had a bunch too, but that's not the point. As I was walking in to the stadium, they had kept what I would call a hallway down the middle for us to walk through and then walk up to the stairs and sit in the stadium while they were doing the triage. And I remember a couple of the critical guys that were laying on those cots buck naked because they cut all their clothes off of them to try to find all the bleeds.
Okay.
And this one African American guy had all of his black clothes laying there, so I knew he was an operator. He was either Delta or he was basically Delta Force. But he had taken a round through the face.
Oh, goodness.
And one eyeball was about half hanging out, and one of them was just staring at me as I walked by. And it was almost like he was begging me to help him. But he was beyond my, first aid ability. I was a combat lifesaver, but I don't know how I'm going to help you. And he was probably one of the next people they took out on the chopper if I'd have had the courage to keep watching him. But that look and that one eye was one of the things that I've never been able to get over.
Yeah, that's...
And so when I couldn't talk like this for years. I didn't have the ability. My mom asked me, why are you not Timmy anymore? Well, Mom, if I can't tell myself why I'm not Timmy anymore, how in the hell do you expect me to tell you?
Right.
But I'm not the same person. I'm never going to be that person. And one of the reasons I go by JT today is I was always Tim or Timmy. My grandparents on my mom's side are Cherokee. And then you go to the Bible. When Jesus called the disciples, he changed their name because they were supposed to be new creatures. When a boy became a man in the Indian society, they changed his name because he's no longer a little groundhog. He was a warrior. I had to get to the point where I saw myself as different. And the people who know me and respect me as JT Cooper are the ones that know who I am since I became a man. My aunts, some of them still call me Timmy because they still want me to be that little boy. But I'm not that little boy anymore. And unless you are willing to acknowledge that, I don't have a lot of time. I might see you at a reunion or this, that, and the other stuff. But until I feel, and I think that's what's harder for guys that were married when they went to war. Because when they come home, their wives and kids already know their name. But every single guy that I meet, I offer that explanation of you're not the same person you were. If you can change your handle or do something different so that the people from this point forward know you're a different person, then you can start accepting that you're a different person and not try to fit back into that old mold.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. It makes perfect sense to me.
I don't know. I came to Nashville, and basically that little conversation with God got me to Nashville from Syracuse, New York, to
That's a trip.
become a songwriter. And there's a whole big story behind how that happened, but it did happen. And it could have only happened with the hand of God involved. But I ended up in Nashville to be a songwriter so that I could learn to articulate what I felt so I could try to explain it to other people. Into the valley we led the way. Fighting on, we earned our pay. For the life we choose, there's no regret. And for winning the battle's even better yet. Stories come and stories go, but the only ones who ever know have walked the path and met a man and taken their life from his dying hand. With each victory, there's a cost. For something gained, there is something lost. And should this be my final breath, Lord, may I still die a warrior's death. And I can still fight, and I can still be a warrior, but I got to find what that passion is to make that happen.
Yep.
And for me, it's raising my family, because now I have a wife and actually have 12 kids.
12.
8 of which are adopted. My wife and I miscarried twins. And again, God, you took my friends, you took my brother, now you took my kids. I said, I know what happened last time when I was mad at you. So this time I'm just going to ask you, before it goes too far down the road, help me understand what it is that I'm supposed to get out of you taking these children. A situation came up from church, and the pastor called me, and my wife and I were teaching a singles class because we were newlyweds, or more or less. And we had both been single, and they thought it'd be a good idea to put us in there teaching the singles to try to help lead them to what we had found.
Okay.
So this single lady showed up to church, and she had a problem with addiction, and she had asked the pastor if anybody at the church could help her with her 2 kids while she went to rehab. Her family had written her off. Nobody wanted her in their life anymore because she had stole from them and lied to them and done all this other stuff. So my wife and I were thinking seriously about taking the 2 kids while she goes to a rehab.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that, I was a smart enough cookie to know that I needed a power of attorney or something to give me the ability to take these kids to the hospital, to make decisions for these kids while she was gone. At the time, we didn't have money for a lawyer, so I just dropped by the Department of Children's Services and asked if they had basically a boilerplate thing that we could sign and she could sign that would give us power of attorney until she got done with rehab. Well, obviously, I wasn't aware of how DCS really worked, but they asked us a bunch of questions, and we said she really needs to go, this, that, and the other. Well, the next afternoon, I get a call from the pastor saying, "Hey, man, what's going on?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I just got a phone call, and I got called everything but a white boy." And,
Oh, goodness.
and I said, "What are you talking about?" Well, apparently they went to the Department of Children's Services showed up school today and took her kids and put them in custody. Well, they wouldn't give them to us because we weren't qualified foster parents.
Oh, my gosh.
So by me, my naivety, my naivety, or whatever you want to say, I was naive to the fact of what would happen when I went to DCS. I wasn't trying to lodge a complaint against her. I was trying to help fix the problem.
Right. Right.
So we went in and talked to the pastor and told him step by step what we had done, how we had visited a home on several occasions. You know, she doesn't have enough money for food, but she's got some narcotics there. There were some major pain pills that were on her bed table that the kids could just grab and eat like candy if they wanted to.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't safe for the kids to be there.
Right.
She needed to get a handle on this, and we were going to try to help her do it. Well, the pastor said, "Well, I don't know what's supposed to be handled." He said, "It sounds to me like you did a lot of good things there." He said, "But I don't know what you're being led to, but I think you two got some talking and some praying to do." And I was like, "Okay." Well, the next week, my wife had me signed up for foster parent classes.
Oh, awesome.
So from that point, we became foster parents. And then,
What year was that? Do you recall?
what's that?
What year was that? Do you recall?
I don't know. It would have been 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. Anyway, long story short, 6 months later, we ended up pregnant with our daughter. We've been foster parents and qualified foster parents. It took, I don't know, 5 or 6 months to get approved to be a foster parent. By that time, she's pregnant, so we didn't really push anything about getting foster kids. But once we had our daughter, I'm like, all right. So God, you give us the daughter. We've had another child. Well, all of a sudden the phone rings, and it's DCS. And they said that you put down that you were willing to adopt. And I was like, yeah, we did. And she said, well, we've got a couple of kids. We got a kid that needs a place to stay, and it's severe child abuse, and we're pretty sure that he's going to be adoptable, and we don't want to move him a bunch of times. So are you guys willing to do that? And I was like, sure. We said we would. So at 10:30 at night, we get a 4-year-old dropped off on our front steps. And that's the first time that I heard from the caseworker that dropped him off that she said, and I quote, "He's got a 6-week-old baby brother that's in ICU at Vanderbilt. And if he leaves, he'll come too." So now we're agreeing to 2 kids and not 1. But this little 6-week-old baby boy was in an incubator when we first met him. And people say they have these epiphanies, or they hear God speak to them, and it wasn't legible. It wasn't like I could really hear God's voice, but I felt it in my heart as I looked at that baby, and he said, "I've got your 2 safe. I needed you ready for these." So if it hadn't been for the miscarriage, and then it hadn't been for the 2 kids we were trying to help through church, we wouldn't have been ready for this baby that had been beat half to death.
Ugh. That's an
4-year-old
amazing story.
4-year-old brother who didn't hardly have a tooth in his head because they'd all rotted out from malnutrition.
Oh no. I presume they're doing happy, healthy, moved on at this
The 4
point.
now 22. The 6-week-old baby boy is now 6'5", 280 pounds, 17 years old, about to graduate high school.
Excellent.
That was our first adoptions. So we got 2 there. Then we had a 5-month-old baby girl that came. And yeah, it's just went on from there.
Wow.
we-
Have any of them just thought about wanting to join the military?
Oh, my birth child, Caleb's already in the military.
Oh, nice. Be sure to tell him thank you.
My oldest stepson, which Myra had when we got married, is a career Air Force guy that's going to retire in a couple of years.
Nice.
He just got finished with his a 3-year tour, a 3-year stay with his family in Tokyo with the Air Force. So he shouldn't have to deploy overseas anymore until he retires.
Oh, that's nice.
But he's been all over North Africa. He's a crew chief with pararescue.
Okay.
So he does a lot of hot insertions and extractions kind of things. So he's been chasing Boko Haram for years and so on and so forth. So yeah, he's seen a few things, but I mean, by the grace of God, one of the things we've had a chance really to talk about is, with his situation, he said, pulling a trigger never bothered me, Dad. He said, but one of the things that haunts me, he was in Japan when the tsunami hit. They tasked his team out for search and rescue. And they found a orphanage. And they ended up retrieving 56 bodies of kids that had been bloated in the drowning and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he said that haunts any of the firefights I've been in. So,
children are always difficult when things like that occur. That's tough anyway. Just that they're so innocent and so young.
I learned that the hard way. One of the things after 9/11 happened, I had this real itch to serve again. And my wife said, well, you're not rejoining the military. I was like, okay. So I became a firefighter, a paid firefighter, 24 on, 48 off, and doing the kids in car wrecks and kids in house fires and that kind of thing. It was a lot different than pulling a trigger in combat.
Yeah, but you continue to serve. I mean, not the military. You're serving the community that you're in. You're serving other families. You're just that type of an individual.
I'm not a firefighter anymore. I lasted 2 years at that. I had done plumbing work for a couple of years before I joined the fire department. And while I was doing 24 on and 48 off, I started my own little side job of plumbing. And it just point that's one of the reasons we've been able to adopt 8 kids is it grew to the point that it was either what's my security, a government paycheck, or what God's doing over here. So I finally I had to walk away from the fire department, and I've been very blessed. And again, one of my wife's passions is raising kids. I tell people all the time, if I could trade them in when they were 5 so I could have a baby again, I wouldn't have 12. I'd have probably been through more than 12 at this point because I hate teenagers.
Oh,
I'm the baby whisperer that everybody says I'm the baby whisperer. I can get them to calm down when a lot of people can't.
hmm
And we've had several that were born addicted that come through the house as foster parents, and I'd be able to calm them down when Myra be like, I go to work and I come home. She's like, that one's yours. You take that one, sit down. I'll bring you your food. She said, I'm done with that one for a minute. So, you know, but I swear to God, I've learned to hate teenagers. They're really a pain in the.
they're trying to come into their own and trying to learn their own independence and feeling their way through it. We have one more, our youngest, so I understand teenagers for sure.
Well, I've been lucky. I've got, Josh is in the Air Force, about close to retirement now. I got Faith, who's 26. It's about to have my second grandbaby, and her husband, great. Uh, my son Caleb is in the military. Out, he's a Army Reserve right now. He wants to work for an alphabet someday. So
Okay.
so he went and got in the reserves, and he's a police officer right now, so that he can have that on his resume as well as the other stuff. He he's a 35 Foxtrot, I think it is. That's secure. That's intelligence. So he's got his top secret clearance already. He got it working on his law enforcement while he's getting his college degree at night and online and that kind of stuff. So then
Well, it sounds like you guys have both done something right. I mean, with these kids, all of them, and
Carson's 22 years old with 17,000 in his savings account. He's he's got out of school and worked and saved his money, and I'm going to try to help him buy a house this year if we can. I'm not going to let him buy a house until the interest rates go back down. But
yeah.
uh, anyway, the ones that have left have found their footing, and
hmm
so I tell my kids, and I know I'm not like a lot of parents these days, but I'm not your friend. I'm your dad, and if you want to be friends, we can be friends when you grow up.
Right.
And I think that's another lesson, that even though my dad, I've told my kids I love them, I tell them I'm proud of them all the time, but that's one of the things I think my dad taught me, was that he was my dad, not my friend. And I think sometimes we get a little too touchy feely with our kids when they don't think there's discipline involved. And so I I don't I don't wear a heavy hand with my kids, but most of the time I can look at them the wrong way or the right their attention.
Right.
Except this little 4-year old that we got right now. 4-year
Mm.
right now is Dennis the Menace on crack. I'm joking. It, one of the things that I've learned over the years, I never realized that in just a couple of years how bad. I mean, even the two. I'm saying 2 to 5 years old, a kid can be so screwed up by parents,
Yeah.
and it's stuff they never get over. It's stuff that Carson came to us when he was 4, but in the short 4 years that he was alive before me, he witnessed some awful stuff. I mean, just awful. And he he's doing well now, but his his teenage years almost killed me. I mean, literally almost killed me, because he didn't understand why what his first parents did wasn't acceptable. You know, my dad and my mom used to do this. My dad and my mom used to. Hey, I'm your dad, and your mom's your mom because we've adopted you. You're being taught a different way of doing things. And you're going to learn that way, because at the end of the day, the reason I have you is because I didn't do the things they did.
That's good points.
And that's the pouring into things that are bigger than me, is taking, the Bible says that there's nothing better you can do than take care of widows and orphans. And even though these kids, they really are orphans, because the state and the courts have cut off custody, even though their parents didn't die. In the legal terms, they are dead. I mean, me and my wife's neither one ever been to Oregon, but we got a kid with an Oregon birth certificate that has us listed as the parents.
Yep.
So,
well, boy, they're very lucky to have you. So, when you retired, from the military, what did you retire as?
No, I didn't retire. I got out as a specialist. I was almost an E5, and I was like, I'm not re-upping just so you can hold that over my head. I felt like I had done my part anyway. I needed to figure out what was next for me. I was wounded in Somalia. I had shrapnel wounds and a torn rotator cuff, and they kept wanting to send me home, and I wouldn't come home because I hadn't killed enough to make up for Jimmy Joe and Cornell. I wasn't going to leave until everybody left.
Right.
At the end of the day, my rotator cuff tear healed a little bit on its own. So by the time I got home, they weren't going to work on me because it already started setting up scar tissue. I can't do pull-ups anymore. From that point on, I couldn't do pull-ups. And all I ever wanted to be in my life was a Green Beret. And there was no way I could do that if I couldn't do pull-ups, if I couldn't climb the rope and that kind of thing. So as much as I tried, I couldn't get my arms to work the way it used to work. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So they would have let me stay and be in a line unit, but after being in some of the places I was, and working with Delta Force and working with Special Forces and working with those, it's a lot different. And the fact that they treat it like a profession. In the line units, they treat everybody like a private. They treat, have to treat everybody the same. And I get it. It's part of it. But, my squad leaders and first sergeants were doing the same stupid stuff most of the time that we were doing. And it just, there was a level of professionalism that I saw in the Special Forces that we did, that was never going to be available to somebody that just stayed in a line unit.
Yeah.
And so I made my decision that wasn't for me, and I needed to get out and deal with what was going through my head anyway. So I did.
And I know we talked about transitioning back to civilian life kind of at the beginning of the show, but assumably they had nothing to help you transition back as they do now with the classes and things of that nature. And
they just kicked me in the ass and said, "See you later," and that's fine. And I'm glad that people are getting the services since 9/11 that they have. I'm glad that there's been recognition. When I got out, nobody knew what PTSD was.
Yeah.
I mean, they called it everything from shell shock to whatever, but nobody classified it as post-traumatic stress syndrome. And that's fine. I'm glad now that they have something to hang their hat on.
Right.
Because there is and I'm glad that it's getting to the point where when they come back, they don't get released right back into society or right back home. They spend 2 weeks in transition or whatever it is, and they go to all these little classes. Or when they're getting out, now they give you like a month of just classes and going through transition. I didn't get any of that.
Right.
And that's, I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not bitter. I've been bitter at the VA but I'm not bitter about the military anymore.
Which is excellent.
And
Do you go ahead?
I've learned how to put new tires on an old truck.
Right. There you go. So do you have any funny stories of the military when you were in, like your basic training or buddies, things of that nature that just really resonate in your head?
Well, we had all kinds of funny stories, and there's a lot that resonates through my head, but they're not all family sensitive. They're not family oriented, if you know.
Well, this show is not for kids. So it's totally up to you if you care to share.
Probably the funniest story that I remember was Boguth and Collins. And we just had our 30th. We're doing every 5 years we do a reunion for Black Hawk. So all of us that were at Black Hawk Down try to get together every 5 years. And we just finished our 30th reunion back in October. And we actually talked about this again at the reunion, and Collins was there. Collins was this 6'3" black guy. Love him to death. Birmingham, Alabama, country cornbread. And let's say Collins had big feet.
Okay.
And so Boguth was a white guy from Minnesota. And Boguth would sit at the end of his cot. And when we were deployed, we all had gang showers, just like we did in basic training. Boguth would sit on the end of his cot every freaking day we got to Somalia and wait for Collins to go to the shower. And Collins would always wait to go to the shower and try to go at the end when everybody was done, because, I mean, he was a mule. So his big feet made it true, if you know what I mean.
Yep, I'm picking up what you're putting down right there.
So Boguth would wait and then follow Collins into the shower. And he'd get in there and he'd be like, Collins, let me see that thing, man. Hey, let me take a look at that again. Hey, Collins, you know, if I had that, I wouldn't wear clothes. Man, he said, I'd be hard pressed to put on underwear if I had that thing. Collins was the first black man I ever met in my life that turned red-faced. And Boguth would tear him up in the shower. Finally, we all had a conversation out of the showers, not in the showers.
Oh, that's good.
We finally we asked Boguth, man, why you give Collins so much hell in the shower? I mean, you're a married man with 2 kids. What is it about giving? He said, man, if a man with something like that needs to pay for it somehow.
Like he could help it.
That he kept messing with Collins. Well, Collins, finally, he said, well, I'm glad to know that, buddy. He said, let me tell you something. You don't want what I got. And Boguth was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, most girls are so scared of it, they won't do nothing but kiss it. I like to have fell out of my cot during this conversation. It was awesome. And this day, that's probably one of the funniest things I ever heard in a combat zone.
Oh, goodness.
And Collins was just red-faced as any. I'm just telling you, he looked like as red as that flag behind you.
That's pretty red.
You could see it clear as day through his black skin. And, you know, back then, it wasn't this whole Black Lives Matter diversity. We didn't give a we talk shit to each other all the time. I mean, Carlos Arguello was Nicaraguan, but I always called him Jumping Bean, and he get mad because I'm not Mexican, mother tucker. I'm not Mexican, mother tucker. I'm Nicaraguan, and I'd be like, you're still a bean. And it was just part of life. We were all green. It didn't matter.
Right.
When we got off the plane in Mogadishu, at the bottom of the stairs, we were on a Tower Air, like big bus, like double decker airplane.
Mm-hmm.
At the bottom of the stairs, they were handing out ammo, and we put the bolt back in our gun. So we all had our weapons on the flight, on the commercial flight. We just were told to take our bolts out of the weapons and put them in our pocket. Okay. At the bottom of the stairs, when we got off the airplane, they were handing out ammo. And nobody was counting it. Nobody was keeping track. They were just handing it out. And I was like, well, something's different here, because I've had to count every brass casing I've ever fired. I've had to turn in, the rings to my grenades, my little pins, to make sure that I had thrown them at the appropriate time and didn't have one that I took home to put under my pillow. I was
right.
That accountability, that when we got over there and they just started handing this stuff out like candy, I was like, oh, this is not the same thing. And they did this to us right off the plane. Well, we're going to take a 5-mile truck ride, and in 93 we didn't have any armored vehicles, so they put us in the back of an open 5-ton.
Oh wow!
And so here we are in the back of this open 5-ton, and if you've ever been to a foreign land like that, a third world country, all the civilians gather outside the main gate, hoping to get something free, get a bottle of water, something thrown at them or given to them as we pull in and out of the compound. Well, they had us. I was the 60 gunner, so I was on the cab of the truck, and I was supposed to watch high, and then everybody else had their weapons pointed out the sides, and they were supposed to watch low. When I didn't understand it, but we had a PSYOPs Humvee with us, and it about 2 minutes before we started out the gate, they just started blasting these 18-inch speakers. I'll never forget this as long as I live. The first song on their little playlist was Enter Sandman by Metallica. So every time that I hear that song, dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun, dun dun dun, that's time to lock and load. And I cannot hear that song today and not smell gun oil. And that's just imprinted on my brain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what they're basically doing was telling everybody outside the gate that they better make way, because when we come out, we're not stopping. And we used to call it parting of the Black Sea, because we were in Africa. Everybody needs to just park and get out of the way so we don't run over you on the way out. Because we were infantry. We weren't playing games. We weren't there to kiss babies and hand out water. We were supposed to be there. The UN was there on a humanitarian mission, and we were there to back them up. But we weren't the ones handing the stuff out. We were the ones that when they started shooting at them, we went in to pull them out.
Right.
So they killed 15 Pakistanis at one of the food drop places. And within 3 weeks, we were on a plane headed to Somalia, because they waited to send us until it got deep.
Right.
For the honor battalion for 214 or for 10th Mountain Division. So they didn't send us until they actually started killing UN workers. So we get up there and we start to we got on the trucks and we start to pull out of the gate. And this is the first time that we had seen the parting of the Black Sea. And Arguello is sitting beside me and he goes, "Hey, Koopa. Hey, Koopa." And I was like, "Yes, Carlo." He said, "How's it feel?" And I said, "What do you mean, how's it feel?" He said, "How's it feel to finally be the minority, motherfucker?" And I said, "It feels like you and I are in the same boat, motherfucker." So, I mean, it's little things like that that keep you laughing. We got attacked by killer bees. We got our first conflict. Our first major conflict with killer bees and lost 7 guys.
Wow.
We had been out on a mission and we were working with special forces. Well, one of the things we never got to play with was C4. So the spec op guys, the next day we were supposed to be on a down day to to train and refit, right? So they just walked over and threw 3 cases of C4 in the back of our truck and told us to practice on shape charges the next day.
Gosh.
So let me tell you how dumb we were. When we were out on one mission, we found this cove. It looked like it was just a great cove to go swimming in. Like it had a little reef out there, had some calm water, and cliffs on 2 sides. So we felt like it was a pretty good place. So we're going to go out there, and the whole goal was we broke up into three groups. So you had a group swimming, you had a group on security, and then you had a group that was making shape charges on top of one of the cliffs and blowing the cliff face out into the water. Well, this is also the breeding ground for sharks. So what we did was took the sniper rifle up on a cliff and we shot one of the sharks out beyond the reef and let it start bleeding until they all started eating at it.
Oh gosh.
And then we went swimming.
Oh my.
And every time it stopped, the water stopped churning, we shot another one. So we just kept shooting the sharks so that we could go swimming. And we're blowing the face off this cliff with shape charges. Turns out inside this cliff is a nest of killer bees. And if you've never seen a swarm of killer bees, you ain't never seen nothing like it in your life. It's like a black cloud that just starts moving and it's just, swooping all over the place. We had off these killer bees, and they come up on the top of that cliff and just attacked the group of guys that were up there. Well, I had already been swimming. I had already blown shape charges. So I'm on security. Well, next thing I hear is a bunch of screaming from the top of the hill, and I look up there, and here's this black cloud. It took us a minute to figure out it was bees, but it was bees. And it had swarmed like the 9 or 10 people that were on top of the cliff.
Oh, gosh.
These jackasses come running down the hill, stripping everything they had on. By the time they got down that cliff, they were buck naked. Don't even doubt it.
No doubts here.
Eddie Tackett was gun 2, which was the second 60 gunner in our platoon. And Eddie starts running at me, saying, "Help me, help me, help me." And I yelled at him. I said, "Eddie, I can't shoot a bee, but I can damn sure shoot you. You get the hell away from me." And basically what we had to do was wait for them to quit moving. We shot a bunch of smoke grenades, but we basically had to wait for them to stop moving and shoot a smoke grenade close enough to them to smoke the bees away before we could go get them. We ended up having to evac 7 guys from bee stings. they got lit up. Eddie Tackett ended up with 181 stingers.
Oh my gosh. Did you have any casualties from that?
To this day, I still send him pictures of bees in a text. I'll text him a picture of just to aggravate him because he hates them with a passion.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I'll text him a picture of a killer bee about 3 times a year, just when I'm thinking about it and I catch him off guard. But I mean, these guys, you got naked guys in the water, you got naked guys running down the hill. I'm the only one sitting over here like, hey, don't come running at me. The water's over there.
Yep.
Go jump in the damn water. I don't think he made it to the water.
Oh my God.
If it had been me, I'd have jumped off the cliff. But I probably wouldn't have been thinking that. I mean, I can't imagine what was going through their head. But Eddie's like, help, Cooper, help. I was like, Eddie, I can't shoot a bee, but I can shoot you. And I meant it. Get that from me.
Don't make another step.
I'm like, I can't shoot a bee, but I can shoot you.
So let's talk a little bit about your nonprofit.
So I have a nonprofit called Warrior Rounds. And in Nashville, for those of you who don't know, songwriter rounds, you go to a bar or a club that's doing songwriter rounds or songwriter nights, and you'll have 4 or 5 songwriters, and you got to understand that a songwriter isn't necessarily an artist. Some of them can't play very well, which is me. I don't play very well with my guitar. I do enough to get by. And some of them can't sing very well, which I can do. But some of them couldn't hold a tune in a bucket. But they love music. So you put 4 or 5 of them up there, and you go down the row and you do a song per person. And then you rotate it back to the front and do another song. And usually when you do a songwriter round, you do 3 rounds. And everybody does 3 songs. But that way, it doesn't stay on one guy that can't sing or one guy that can't play very well for 3 songs in a row or 5 songs in a row. You keep changing. And I'm talking about hit songwriters. Pat Algers, who's had major cuts, many cuts by Garth Brooks, can't sing a lick. Couldn't hold a tune in a bucket with no holes in it. I'm just telling you. But he's a heck of a songwriter, and he's good. He's good at putting words to lyric. He does lyrics, a lot of lyrics. Anyway, that being said, Warrior Rounds is where I started it 3 years ago now. But what we do is I take my Nashville songwriting battle buddies and I pair them at a retreat with my veteran battle buddies some of whom I've just met. But I bring veterans in and pair them with songwriters to help them articulate their story. And
that is wonderful.
What's that?
That is wonderful.
So what we usually do is we'll come in, we'll do like a breakfast and introduce let the songwriters and the veterans kind of meet each other. And I'll kind of watch the crowd and see who pairs better with who. And then we break off into individual groups and they'll go write the song with the veteran. And then we come back for lunch. And then after lunch, we figure out who's further along in their song and who's got their song written and so on and so forth. And then we start doing a video interview with that vet and the songwriter, because there's this magic moment when you write a song that every song you write is going to be a hit. And those vets, this may be their first song they ever been a part of helping to write, but because it's their story, they feel like there's that euphoria that you only get that one time in that room. So we want to catalog that for posterity. So what we do is we do an interview with the singer, the songwriter, and the vet, and let the vet basically tell their story, and then let the songwriter talk about his experience meeting that vet. Well, then we take those videos and we edit them down so that, a veteran isn't necessarily a performer. But what we do is edit it down so they don't feel like they're stupid or that they, yeah, then we don't do a lot of the uhs and stuff.
Right.
So we edit it, and then we go out to a live show venue and set up a Warrior Rounds event, and we let them invite their friends and family to come see what they went through at the retreat. And so instead of the songwriter, most of your songwriters, when they're doing a songwriter round, say, well, I was with Jerry so-and-so, and we were talking about this, and that's where the song comes from. Well, instead of going through that, we let the veteran tell their story in that euphoric moment that they had writing it. And then we take that to a live show venue, and when we get up there to do our Warrior Round, we let the songwriters do one of their hit songs or one of their popular songs so that the crowd gets to know what that songwriter's done or not done.
Right.
And then the next time through, we let the veteran tell their story through the video. We take the lights down, turn the video on, let everybody see the veteran tell their story, and then we world debut their song in front of their friends and family. And then we record that, the live show, and we go back and we take the interview and the live show and pair them together, and that becomes a segment that we give them, and they got it for posterity. It doesn't cost the veteran a dime, never costs the veteran a penny. It just their time, and we feed them breakfast and lunch. We do the videos and all that stuff. We take them out to the live show, let them bring their families, and we go from there.
That is amazing. Absolutely amazing what you do with that. Now, I found out about you through a guest that I had, James Thornton.
Right.
And he allowed me to show and share his video on the channel that you guys had done for him. And it's amazing. I mean, it's really very emotional and heartfelt and just incredible how you as songwriters are able to capture those thoughts and put them into something like that.
Articulate.
Yes.
Articulate.
Yes. How you're able to do that. How you're able to articulate how the veterans feel.
Myself, I couldn't put it into words for my mom. I couldn't put it into words for myself. So I spent 20 years learning the craft of songwriting so that I could learn how to evoke that emotion enough that even if you've never served in the military, you can feel that song. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does.
Because music is such a medium that everybody understands music.
Yes.
And we may not all like the same genres, but everybody understands music. And if I found that the biggest thing that helps us and that helps me with that is that, I have family members that have came up and said, man, I wish my dad would have lived to see that, to come to Warrior Rounds, because he never could talk about it. Well, every time a veteran sees Warrior Rounds, they call and say, hey man, what can I do to be a part of this? I want to come talk to somebody. I've never been able to talk, but I feel like I could do it in that environment.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing, I had one guy who's like, all right. He's like, I want to thank you. And I said, for what? And he said, I try to always send the interview videos to the veteran directly before we do the live shows to see if there's anything they want to change or to make sure they feel like we've honored them through that video. And he's like, well, I wasn't sure. My wife kept asking me what this was all about because I told her we had to come to the show. My wife, kept asking me what all this was about. And I didn't know how to tell her. But when you sent me the video, I showed her the video, and now she's all in to come see it. But I had to tell her some stuff before I showed her the video because there's some of it that I had never told her. So we helped open a dialogue between him and his wife. Command Sergeant Major Rhodes goes out as a Command Sergeant Major. He gets invited to a lot more stuff than a lot of people. But he always tapes his and shares it with the crowd before, and lets that be his introduction before he takes the podium. And there's never a time. The name of his song was "If It's Worth Living For," if it's worth dying for, it's worth living for. And it basically talks about how if you were willing to go over there and give your life, you need to come back here and live it. And just the way it got articulated was awesome. But we have a lot when he does his thing, we have a lot of Gold Star families that come up and talk to him about suicides and how that their loved one had committed suicide while they were still on duty or while they were still active Army or whatever. And so it's become like a suicide healing thing, and he stays in touch with a lot of those families, and they have his phone number if they ever need to talk. But it's a way for him to nutshell what he is all about before he even gets to the podium.
Right.
So Eric Fraser lost both his legs in an IED attack in Afghanistan. We did the live show, and this guy comes up, and he's like, "JT, when can I get that video?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "When can I get Eric's video?" I said, "Well, I could probably get it to you next week if that's quick enough." He said, "Yeah, I want to nominate him to be the Marine of the Year for the Tennessee Marine Corps Ball."
Oh, wow.
And so, anyway, I sent him the video. He turns it into the nominating committee for to pick the Marine of the Year for Tennessee Marine Corps Ball. Somebody on the nominating committee worked with a national organization called Hands Across America or something like that. And Hands Across America are, honestly, the words are getting mixed up in my brain right now. But Lee Greenwood is their major spokesperson. And
Okay.
Pro Shops is the main contributor to that organization. They built Eric an accessible home, mortgage free.
That's wonderful.
It all started with him coming to this show. And I can't tell you how many stories like that are out. Eric's is probably the most beneficial as far as getting a free house or getting a house that he could, roll his wheelchair around in and stuff. I've had Warrior Rounds going for 3 years, and I probably have spent a couple of $100,000. But at one point, I never could have just built Eric a house. But knowing
Right.
that I was a part of that happening makes it worth it.
Right. Killian asked, he just wanted clarification and said the Tennessee Marine Corps Ball.
Yeah, they host a Tennessee Marine Corps Ball every year for all the Marines across the state of Tennessee. And I'm not a Marine, so I don't know as much about it, but I do know it happens every year.
And Killian is a Marine.
And what?
Killian is a Marine.
Yeah. As far as that goes, I can probably get Killian in touch with some people that would know more about that than I do. Eric, especially, I can give you Eric's phone number, but I don't know where it happens, when it happens, all that, but I do know they have one every year.
That's wonderful. So how do people then get a hold of you or Warrior Rounds? What's the process?
If you go on the website for Warrior Rounds, there's a link up there that you click that says sign up.
Okay.
I have an email, jt@warriorrounds.com, where you can send me a direct email. Now, where I've been in and out of the hospital, we've kind of put some things on hold just because it doesn't happen unless I pay for it or if I'm there to help facilitate it. So I haven't got the staff and I haven't got everything set in place for me to take for me to walk away for a minute. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So where I've had health issues, we're not as active this year as we've been, but I've got this thing coming up with James. I've got a couple of events scheduled for the spring, so we're going to get back into it. It's not that it's gone away. We just haven't been as active as we were for the 2 years prior. We were trying to start out with six retreats and six shows a year.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 month we would have the retreat, and the next month we would have the show. I want to build out to where we're having a retreat twice a month. We're having a show twice a month. So
wow,
I want to grow it to. We had our first, not CMT, not Country Music Television, but the Country Network gave us an opportunity. And last Memorial Day, we did our first 1 hour special on national TV.
that's amazing.
And what we want to do is get to a point where we're almost like amazing home makeovers and that kind of thing, where we're telling the positive stories. We're telling these stories of these vets and telling their story, and then getting to the point where we do 6 segments in an hour-long show. That kind of thing, where we're constantly turning it over. And then, there's also plans to start a tour, and every year we take like the top 15 or 16 songs and we go on tour with these videos to other states where people can't get to Tennessee to come to the live shows, or it's harder for them to get to Tennessee and come to the live shows. But we want to get to a point where we bring the veterans in on a Friday night. They go downtown Nashville and get to see everything downtown. They come to the retreats on Saturday, and then Sunday morning we have breakfast and say goodbye to everybody, and everybody breaks up and goes home for back to their real life kind of thing on Sunday afternoon. So that's the goals.
Wow.
We want to when we start the tour, we want to start making sure that 6 months out from the tour date that we've got for, say we're coming to Louisville or Shepherdsville, Kentucky, and we're going to do a theater there. We want to start 6 months out trying to partner with a church or an organization there, where we've got a 13-week study course that we've been working on that helps. I started a book called PTSD, Positive Trails to Self-Discovery.
That's a wonderful title.
You take the positives, you take the negatives and turn them into a positive. And how you can let what you've been through drive you to a higher plane. One of the chapters in the book is called Don't Shit Where You Eat. When I was in the Army, when we went on bivouac, one of the first things they taught us was to build the latrine outside of the campsite. So the whole point of the book is, if you come home, why are you taking a shit in your living room? Why are you going through 4 divorces before you figure out you got a problem? If you went to war for your family and your friends, why do you bring it home and dump it in their lap instead of the lap of somebody that can help you get through it? I didn't take my wife to war to drag her through the mud and the blood. So why would I come and dump it in my living room? Because one of the things that happened in my marriage early on was I woke up taking an AK-47 away from my wife, and I'm on top of her, not being friendly. And it scared her. So I had to find a couch. I thought I had it under control. I'm the man. I'm a man. I got this handled. But I scared her. And that was the last thing I ever wanted to do.
Right.
So I found some, even though I thought I had it in control and I had a lot of good things going, I found a counselor and the couch for about 6 months. The counselor went on a little longer than that, but the couch lasted about 6 months. But the more you have a dog at home?
2.
What happens if you don't take them outside?
They do their business in the house.
Or they try to break out of the cage, or they try to break out of the house, don't they?
Yes.
If you take those dogs for a walk, they don't try to break out.
Correct.
So if you find a place to take your PTSD for a walk and you talk about it, you journal it, you put it on paper in black and white. If I go to the grocery store, I have to take a list or I forget something. But when my brain sees it in black and white, my mind doesn't wake me up at 10 o'clock at night saying, damn it, I forgot to get the milk for kids' cereal in the morning.
Right.
But when I don't have it on paper and my mind thinks I forgot it, it's going to wake me up in the middle of the night. Trauma means that your mind doesn't want you to forget it so that you don't do it again. So it wakes you up in the middle of the night when it thinks you're forgetting about it.
Yeah.
So if you take that dog for a walk in a safe place, you don't take a shit in your living room.
Those are truer words. Yeah, exactly.
So that's another example of what learning to articulate things has led me to. And between the songwriting and the other writings, I've learned to help other people. So 25 years later, from my coming home, I was able to write Coming Home. Because I finally was ready to share that part of inside of me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And I was probably ready at 20 years, but I still thought I wasn't. And then I wrote Coming Home, and it started bringing a lot of people to the table. I know these old back roads like the back of my own hand, but the boy who used to drive them. I know these old back roads like the back of my own hand, but the boy who used to drive them got lost in a foreign land. Everywhere I turn my head, I see nothing here's changed, but not one thing inside of me will ever be the same. And I raise my hands in anger. I shout up at the sky. Hey God, what were you thinking? What made me the lucky guy? It's a battle just to be here. I sometimes feel alone. They took my weapons and left me fighting, and they called it coming home. The preacher said I'm lucky. Him and God might think I am. But freedom did spit on me like the boys back from Vietnam. I'm thankful for the thank yous, and I know that you mean well. But I hope you never see in me the part that walked through hell. When I raise my hands in anger, I shout up at the sky. My God, what were you thinking? What made me the lucky guy? It's a battle just to be here. In my mind, I'm alone. They took my weapon, left me fighting, and they called it coming home. Yes, I'm still a warrior. I can't admit defeat. So I'm going to climb this mountain till the mission is complete. When I raise my hands in anger, I may shout up at the sky. Hey God, what were you thinking? What made me a lucky guy? It's a battle just to be here. In my mind, I'm alone. They took my weapons, left me fighting. And man, they called it coming home. Yeah, they called it coming home. They took my weapons and left me fighting. And they called it coming home.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's the best way I can articulate it.
And
I hope
that's really powerful.
I'm hoping that people get to the point where they realize you don't shit where you eat. Put some new tires on an old truck. And find something to be a part of that's bigger than yourself. You don't like the VFW? Don't go to the VFW. You don't. I go to Dave meetings. I like the guys at Disabled Vets. You know, find the place that you go that you feel like you can share your story. You feel comfortable sharing your story because it's not with strangers. I mean, you can sit in a Dave meeting for years before you even say a word. But when they tell their story, hopefully it inspires you to tell yours. That's what AA is founded on. Everybody sharing each other's stories.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Find that place where you fit in, that you feel comfortable. But don't sit in your house and watch paint dry and say, oh, me, I can't explain it to nobody, because you're full of shit. Oh, woe is me. Never got anybody anywhere. Eric Frazier has both. He's lost both his legs, but he still gets up every day and is productive.
Right.
And
So
that he has sole custody of his daughter. Tell me what judge, especially in a southern state, gives full custody to the dad?
not very often.
Eric's got his stuff together. And that's the kind of thing that we try to emphasize. And just like writing a song, yes, I'm still a warrior. I can't admit defeat. So I'm going to climb this mountain because the mission's not complete. You take that and you tell the story in the first two verses, and then in the bridge, you know, Dan DeMay is one of my buddy songwriters, one of my battle buddy songwriters. And he says, you know when you put a bridge in a song? And I said, when? He said, when it takes you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
He said, the nature of bridges is that you take a bridge from one piece of land to another piece of land. He said, so if you're going to put a bridge in a song, make sure it says something different than the rest of the song. So
excellent.
when we write our songs at these retreats, I make sure that when we're doing our meet and greet and I do my introduction to Warrior Rounds to all the veterans, the songwriters already have heard this, but we want to tell whatever story you want to tell. But don't be surprised as a songwriter, it's if we tell the positive at the end.
Right.
Because there's got to be something positive that's happened in your life since you came back.
Yep.
We wrote a song with one guy called the Blue Canoe. And the whole song was basically a funny song about a mortar attack when there was somebody in the Porta-John and the Porta-John turned over during the mortar attack, and he come out blue as the blue guys crew.
Oh my gosh.
And he's walking through the compound blue because he was in the Porta-John when the mortars hit. And the mortar blew over the Porta-John, and he come out of the Porta-John covered in blue.
Wow.
So it doesn't have to be cut your wrist songs. I mean, if you want to talk about your Christian experience, I've got guys I can pair you with that's willing to help you tell how you went from hell to heaven. We want to tell whatever you want to share. And we're going to do that. I tell everybody, we're not here to write a hit song. We're here to write your song.
Right.
And if it turns out to be a hit, then that means more people are going to relate to it.
Exactly right.
You've been through something that they're going through, and now they want to be a part of the healing process that you've been a part of.
Yes.
I had this guy, Jamie, and I'm sorry, I know I'm on and on and on here.
You're okay.
But I had this one vet named Jamie, and Jamie came in to write a song, and I said, Jamie, what do you want to write about? And he said, I don't want to write. I said, so you come to a songwriting retreat and you don't want to write? And he said, no. I said, well, then why'd you come to a songwriting retreat? He said, because my wife told me I had to. I was like, well, we got to write about something. He said, well, why don't you help me write a song that keeps me from wanting to put the gun in my mouth the next time? Okay, well, let's do our best, Jamie. Jamie was a Christian, but he was still struggling with what all he'd seen and what all he had done. The first thing I did was put my guitar down and my notebook down that I was going to write on. And I asked him, I said, do you know about King David? And he's like, yeah, I know about King David. I said that they said that Saul had killed his thousands and David had killed his 10,000s. David was a warrior, but he's also a poet. He said, okay. I said, Jamie, I said, you can put being a warrior and being a Christian in the same boat, because there was a lot of warriors in the Bible. He started thinking for a little bit, and we started thinking for a little bit. I said, Jamie, do you serve at your church? He said, yeah. He said, I got to. I said, why is that? And he said, because I got to do something that's bigger than me. And I said, yep, you do. And that was awesome that he'd figured that out already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jamie's song says, yes, I've been on missions. Yes, I've been to war. I fired a shot in anger, but I don't do that anymore. I'm not the only one who served, and I'm not the only one who understands. But I'm going to serve till he calls me home. That's what he made us for all along.
Wow.
And then the second verse basically says, yes, I've chambered the bullet. Yes, I've tasted the gun. But how was killing myself going to serve anyone? I still owe my honor to my brothers who come home under flags. And we took that song, I still owe my honor to those ones who come home with flags.
Yep.
So I'm going to serve till he calls me home. That's why he made us all along. I'm going to serve till he calls me home. That's been our mission all along. First you're born, then you die. The dash between becomes our life. And I'm going to serve till he calls it home. I told him, I said, Jamie, we're not ever going to get to pick the day we were born. And by the grace of God, we'll never pick the day we die. All we're responsible for is the dash in the middle. And that becomes our story. And I'm here to help you write your story. And how that line made it in the song is just part of the process. The dash between,
Yeah.
It's all about that dash between. Is my story going to be a story of bitterness, or is it going to be a story of conquering?
Yeah. I think that's excellent. That really shows, it gives them a mindset of just what you said, that dash, that in between. What are they doing in that moment? And I think that's huge for them, because it helps to kind of bring their mind forward, a focal point, as opposed to just out there in their own thoughts.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, the dash is all we got.
Right.
That's the only thing we got that's ours. And honestly, that's the only thing we're going to take with us because it's going to be on every one of us tombstone.
That's right. That's right.
And
Well, let me ask if anybody out here
All
has
right.
any questions that's in the chats. If you've got any questions for JT, go ahead and get those put out there now. And I've put his link, that's warriorrounds.com, out there. So if there's any veterans interested, again, you can click on or type in warriorrounds.com. And he said there is a link out there you can click on to and read through everything. Yep. And see what's out there for you. If it's something that you want to do, or if you just want to get in touch with them and get a little more information, you can certainly do that as well.
I would just go when you go to the website, there's also a place called Veteran Stories. And if you go there, it's going to be a link to a lot of the different segments. And there's even more on our YouTube channel, Warrior Rounds, YouTube. We rotate them in and out on the website.
I've watched a couple of them, and they're really very good.
Well, I appreciate that, and I thank you for getting our message.
Absolutely. I know. Are you going to be with James Thornton when they bring the traveling wall?
I'm going to be. I'll be singing. I'll be bringing some people up to play, and we're going to present Warrior Rounds to the audience.
That's wonderful. And can you tell? I know James talked about it briefly when he was a guest. Do you have the dates? Do you recall what those dates were?
It's the end of July.
Okay.
26th or something. I don't have the date. They're not right on the top of my head, but I know it's the end of July.
Killian says, amazing story tonight, and to keep the faith, brother.
Yes, sir. Killian, it's nice to meet you. Yeah, if he's in Tennessee and he's interested in that Marine Corps ball, just reach out to me, Killian, and I'm on the website. It's got contact us. It should have my email there too. If you forget, but it's easy. It's just JT@warriorrounds.com.
There you go. Anybody else have anything that they wanted to say to JT, or any questions? While we wait to see if we've got any other, I know Jason has said that definitely there's a power of music, and there's a power to music and song, which 100% agree with that. Let's see. I know we had some others in here. We had Angry Sarge was in the chats earlier, and one of the things that he had said was that he'd say about the military is that he met some of the greatest people ever because of his time in service, and he's always thankful for that. And that obviously, you know, the things that happened in your life and the things that you were considering, that God was not going to allow that because you still have a purpose to fill.
Oh, yeah. I know that now, but it's hard to see the forest for the trees when you're in it.
That's right. DJ Play Nice says music is the only universal language, and it makes them. And I agree 100% with you, DJ. Music is something that everybody can come together on, and it takes you from one moment in time to another. Happy, sad. It's, you know, it can be any emotion that you care for it to be.
Yep.
And if anybody, yeah. So Killian did say he'd reach out. So if
every time I hear Leonard Skinner, I'm back at the lake in high school and just having a ball.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing, isn't it? What music can do for us, and it really can heal a lot.
Right after the Battle of Mogadishu, or Black Hawk Down, whatever you want to call it, I had back then you had a little Walkman, that Walkman.
Yep.
And I had the new Pearl Jam album out, and it had Alive on it. And I know the lyrics don't always lean exactly to our story, but I bet you I wore out 3 cassettes of Pearl Jam, just fast forward and rewinding back and forth on that song. I just sat there and listened to it for days.
Yeah.
And that song Alive just means so so much to me at that moment, and it still does today, because I can still feel myself sitting in that room in Mogadishu that we called a bunk, and I just sit there back and forth, and I'm a country boy, and that Alive song was awesome, and that Metallica song I told you a while ago. Every time I hear
Correct.
it, I can smell gun oil.
Yeah.
Those emotions are real. Those emotions, your body remembers that song, and it can take you. It can transport you in a hurry somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know how the endorphins in your body just put you there.
Right. So Killian says technically mathematics is also a universal language, but nobody likes math.
He's funny.
He is very funny.
Does Killian Red?
What's that?
Killian's Red. Killian Red. It's a beer.
Oh yeah. I don't know what his choice of beer is anymore, but I want to thank you again very much for taking the time to away from your family and sharing your story with us, everybody in the chats, anybody who will be listening to this in the recorded version. And it really means a lot, I think, to a lot of obviously veterans, but where I am not a veteran, just as an ordinary individual, I do have two military sons, Killian being one of them. And so it's a matter of, yeah, he actually really was named after the beer Killian.
Really?
Yeah. So, but it's amazing to me, to hear those stories, and as a mom of military individuals, it helps me to also try and relate, right? To hear the stories from others, because you might not get to hear it from your own child. So, and that's true for any mom that has military children, and fathers too. Don't get me wrong. But so thank you for that and for sharing. And if ever there's anything you want to share later on, any new videos, I'm happy to put them out there for you and get the word out more. Share those with me, and I'll throw them out so everybody can hear them.
I want to apologize for drowning on for 2 hours, but I hope it wasn't too boring.
No, not at all. And please don't apologize. Again, this is a platform for you to talk about whatever you want to talk about. So I appreciate you feeling comfortable enough to open up and talk. So thank you for that.
If I could do anything in the world, it'd be that 22 a day would be zero.
Agreed.
Anybody I can talk out of it, or anybody that I can share a positive story about suicidal tendencies, I want to do that.
Agreed. DJ Play Nice says, JT, thanks for being on the program today and to keep up the good work.
Y'all have a great.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm not seeing any questions at this point. So if you want to hang tight for me, JT, we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap this up. Everybody tonight, thank you very much for showing up. We really appreciate you coming out. And we will have another show actually this Thursday. So make sure you tune in then, 6 p.m. Central Time as well. So again, thank you all for being out there tonight and in the chats. Everybody have a great night.